General Field Marshal Erich von Manstein manipulates the evidence to change the perspective we now have on the Battle of Stalingrad and the commander of 6th Army, Friedrich Paulus. Popular opinion states that Paulus was timid, that Paulus was at fault, that Paulus is to blame for not breaking 6th Army out at Stalingrad. People say that Paulus should have defied Hitler's orders and ordered his army to break out, and it is Manstein who is the one championing this view. The problem is that Manstein is the one at fault, not Paulus, and Paulus is taking the blame because Manstein has manipulated the evidence. He has changed popular opinion against Paulus in order to protect his own image, and in this video we will find out exactly how and why he did it. Manstein is lying. Let's find out why. Assuming the breakout attempt was possible, which it probably wasn't by mid-December anyway, we have a situation where Paulus is ordered to hold his ground under all circumstances. He's told he would receive adequate air supplies and told that he would be rescued soon. He therefore waits for the order to break out. The problem is that Paulus is taken prisoner after the battle. He's made a field marshal, doesn't commit suicide as he was supposed to do, and is shamed by the events of the battle. While he's in Soviet custody, he can't defend himself to the public. He was only released in 1953. By this time, his reputation is in the gutter. 2 years after his release, Manstein publishes his memoirs, which become massively popular and have since gone on to paint him as, well, not only innocent of all war crimes, but also as a military genius. These memoirs play upon the opinion that Paulus was passive, timid, and so on. When General Paulus let the last opportunity slip, when he hesitated and finally decided against the venture, he certainly did so on account of the responsibility he felt on his own shoulders. Well, this military genius was the only general out of Wieks, Paulus, Richthofen and all of Paulus's core commanders saying that 6th Army should hold on. Whatever motivation Manstein may have had for his assessment of the situation, its psychological effect was devastating. Not only did it mean the collapse of what a day earlier was still a united front of the generals against Hitler, but it endowed his operational stubbornness with an appearance of professional soundness. Small wonder, therefore, that, supported in his plans by the most respected operational authority of the day, Hitler again displayed signs of confidence and became even more intolerant of dissenting opinions than before. Let's look at the timeline again. 19th of November 1942, Operation Uranus begins and 6th Army is surrounded by the 23rd of November. On the 20th, Jesenek indicates to Hitler that 6th Army could be supplied by air, which Hitler then decides is the correct course of action. 22nd of November, Goering arrives and confirms this by promising the Luftwaffe could supply Paulus's army. 24th of November, the day after the encirclement is complete, Manstein sends a letter to the High Command, under the assumption that the air resupply would be sufficient to sustain 6th Army in the field and that he would receive more forces to begin the relief attempt. Manstein recommended that 6th Army's breakout be delayed. The encirclement at this point is very thinly held. Apart from reacting instantly and abandoning Stalingrad before the encirclement is closed, withdrawing in the last days of November 1942 is the best time for Paulus to begin a breakout attempt. If he does it now, before the Soviets throw in more troops between the 6th Army and the rest of German lines, there's a good chance that Paulus could break out with a significant portion of his army. But Manstein delays the breakout attempt. Based on assessments like these, along with Manstein's imminent presence on the scene and Göring's comforting, if unrealistic, assurances about resupplying 6th Army, Hitler had some reason to believe that the Uranus encirclement could be defeated and that 6th Army could survive for a brief period if it could be resupplied by air. Effectively, Hitler is persuaded by Brezhnev, Göring and Manstein. So basically, at a time where rapid action was needed, Manstein, the greatest of Germany's World War II generals, recommends a delay. The fact that Manstein broke up the united front among the generals concerning the peril facing 6th Army indicates his personal responsibility for its ultimate fate. In Hitler's eyes, at that time, Manstein was probably the army's most influential voice concerning operational matters. Paulus describes to Manstein the state of his army in a letter on the 26th of November. Manstein does not realise the scale of the problem, and even when he speaks to Weeks, the penny does not drop. In fact, it is at this point, bearing in mind that he blames Paulus after the war in his memoirs, that Manstein sends this message to Paulus. The Führer's order relieves you of all responsibility other than the most appropriate and resolute execution of the Führer's order. What happens when, in execution of the Führer's order, the army has fired off its last bullet? For that you are not responsible. At this point, Manstein says Paulus is not to blame. Paulus is being ordered to stand, even though Paulus doesn't want to, and therefore the responsibility isn't his. And it isn't, since both Manstein and Hitler are in agreement that Paulus should stay where he is. It's only on the 28th of November, after speaking to Richthofen and Pickert, that Manstein finally realises that his initial assessment of the situation was wrong, and then it's basically blame Paulus time. Up to this point, Manstein is saying, it's not your responsibility, Paulus, and Hitler and me think you should stay where you are, and don't worry, we'll get you out, no problem. It's only when he realises that he can't get him out that Manstein then starts backtracking. Knowing now that 6th Army could not be supplied by air, he contacts Hitler, who agrees with Manstein's alternate plan. The alternate plan is for the 2 relief prongs to start on the 3rd and the 9th of December, and the idea was for Paulus to mount a breakout attempt simultaneously. But by the time the Winter Tempest operation gets going on the 12th of December, so later than it should have done, 6th Army is already significantly weakened, mainly because they're half-starved and have eaten their horses. And Paulus still doesn't have the order to break out, and this is where the lies begin. At the height of the relief operation, Manstein claims to have sent the breakout order to Paulus on the 19th of December. An order was issued to 4th Panzer and 6th Armies at 1800 hours, in which the latter was directed to commence breaking through to the southwest forthwith. And he even references that order and provides it in the appendix of his memoirs. The problem is that reading the appendix, what you find is that he doesn't actually give the order to break out. He says Paulus should prepare for the breakout and that it should start soon after the relief attempt, but he never actually orders it to start. In fact, in the pinned comment in the comment section below, I will provide you with the full order as Manstein writes it, so you can read it. At no point does it say, "Dear Paulus, start the breakout, love Manstein." It doesn't say that. No, despite a constant exchange of messages between the two commanders, at no point does Manstein issue Paulus with the breakout order. What this order on the 19th does do, though, is that it puts responsibility for the breakout squarely on Paulus's lap. Manstein is effectively saying, I'm not defying the order, but you can, Paulus, if you want to. The problem is that Manstein is unable to assure Paulus that the relief forces were going to reach him, and this is the point where Paulus's army is weakened by starvation and a lack of supplies. This in turn convinced Paulus not to defy Hitler's orders and launch his breakout attempt. Not that there was much hope for a successful breakout attempt at this point anyway, since realistically the breakout order should have come earlier, much earlier, either late November or early December, but the order never comes. Basically, to sum up the entire events, what happens is that Manstein sides with Hitler and the Luftwaffe against the other generals, thus further persuading Hitler that he was right. He delays the breakout attempt, then finds out that he can't break the siege as he thought he could originally, shifts responsibility to Paulus at the last minute, and then goes, well, it's Paulus's fault. I gave him the order to break out and he hesitated, even though he didn't give him the order. No, the reality is that Manstein is lying. Manstein should take full responsibility for the failure of 6th Army to break out early. Manstein should take responsibility for the failure to provide 6th Army with the order to break out, because he said he did, even though he didn't, and for the ultimate destruction of 6th Army. Manstein is also significantly responsible for the poor reputation Paulus receives post-battle. Paulus is not as passive or as hesitant as Manstein makes him out to be. Paulus wants to break out, and it was Manstein who said no. This military genius, who was the best German general of World War II, passes the blame onto Paulus so as not to tarnish his own reputation. And this is another example of why you cannot take anything at face value, why you cannot rely on one source of information, and why you have to question everything. And this is another example of why you shouldn't be trusting memoirs. In this case, this was written 20 years after the war ended and 22 years after the battle in question. Just because someone was there does not make them right. Manstein is lying at Stalingrad. Remember that. I was only able to purchase Glantz's works and the official German history of the war, as well as other books, thanks to the support of my Patreons. As always, you guys are awesome, so thank you. Now, I've pushed this other video before, and I'll push it again. If you haven't seen David Glantz's video on the myths and realities of the Eastern Front in World War II, go watch it. You honestly deserve it to yourself. Go and see it. Go. Click the link on the screen and in the pinned comment below. Thank you very much for all of you for watching. Bye for now.